Hey everyone, I'm Mr. Terry, a high school history teacher. Welcome back to another History Teacher Reacts video. All right, it's been a while since we hit up some History Matters. And I don't know why I haven't hit it as much, because you all are really still watching History Matters. And this recent one has really got some good traction, and I want to learn about it and hopefully give my feedback, of course. So this video is called, Why Was Texas Divided After It Joined the USA? Before you check that out, make sure you are sub to History Matters. I would say they make probably the best, very short form, like 3-4 minute videos out there. So the video link will be down below. One final question. If you are not from the United States, would you say Texas is the first state that comes to mind when you think of the United States? Let me know down below, and let's check this video out. All right. As many of you will know, let's see what they got.
You will know when Texas joined the United States, it looked like this. However, a mere 5 years later, it had lost all of these lands, which nowadays form parts of New Mexico, Oklahoma, Kansas, Colorado, and even Wyoming. This massive loss of land raises an obvious question: why? Why did Texas lose all this territory, and why did the Texans agree to it?
One thing we got to set up for context here is, why is Texas a thing in the first place? That may be the most interesting part of Texas history, is how it came to be. So that whole region was once occupied by Mexico, and Mexico was actually encouraging settlers into the area, and that brought in a lot of Americans. All right, from the United States, coming over from the east into the west there for, because Mexico wanted it to be, a place that gets, settled, and they build up agriculture and industry and all those kind of things. And that was a, pretty good opportunity for people from the United States. However, there were a lot of rules that they wanted to set. A few things like that. Slavery, not going to be part of that. Slavery was abolished in Mexico. Also renouncing American citizenship, becoming a Roman Catholic. There were all these rules, and as you might be able to expect, the Americans that did come over from the United States weren't playing by a lot of those rules. So you end up getting the Texas Revolution, as they were revolting against Mexico, and then Texas for a while was trying to operate independently as the Texas Republic, and did that for a little bit, but then eventually sought to join the United States. And then I guess that's kind of in a way where we're picking up right now.
So in 1836, Texas won its independence from Mexico after a short war. Mexico didn't really accept this independence, but there was little they could do about returning Texas to the fold, given all of the unofficial help that the United States had given it during the war. The brand new Republic of Texas claimed all of this territory, but only really had firm control over this. That doesn't mean Mexico controlled it. In fact, most of it was controlled by the Comanche tribe, but nobody recognized their claim to anything.
Because that's how it was for every land battle, right? Whether it was English, it was the French, it was Spain, it was Mexico. The bottom at the list were, of course, the people that were there the whole time.
So after about a decade of politically ignoring Texas, the US annexed it as a state. The overlapping claims of the US's newest member in Mexico soon led to the Mexican-American War, which ended with the US victory and Mexico losing all of this. So after winning a war for Texas...
Mexico, I mean, that was devastating for Mexico, and the fact that that almost cut Mexico in half. The Mexican-American War, 1848. I mean, it cut that in half, and we're about to hit a gold rush literally the year after.
Texas's disputed territory, it would be fair to assume that Texas would be given its claimed lands, but fun fact, no. Instead, the federal government argued that the Texan claim wasn't that strong, and that even though the land definitely wasn't Mexican anymore, it also wasn't Texan. The concern was that this new state was far too large, and thus would wield too much power in the future.
One question I have is, so that sliver that's under the American flag there, right? You guys can help me with this. I know this area, those part, that has the Texan flag there was heavily settled, but these areas, a little bit north and west of that, the old Texas Republic, how was that in terms of settlement as compared to the portions on the right? Let me know down below.
The concern was that this new state was far too large, and thus would wield too much power in the future. And so, as part of a broader discussion on how to incorporate America's new land, several prominent senators put forward proposals on how to divide Texas. The first idea was that of Missouri Senator Thomas Benton, who proposed that Texas be divided like this, with the north and west going to the federal government as part of the territory of New Mexico, and the rest being divided into two states, Texas and Colorado.
We know that one doesn't work. One thing we noticed too, especially in this era of like 1800s, how bad like nations were at border disputes. I mean, it's always a hard thing to deal with borders, anyways. But like 1800s is notorious, especially in kind of the scope of imperialism.
This plan was much more about keeping the free state-slave state balance in the Union,
makes
but it was
sense,
also
then.
unpopular with the
That was
Texans.
the hot topic.
Furthermore, it broke the rule of splitting states. The next plan was put forward by Senator Henry Foote, who pushed for Texas to simply be divided into 2 states, Texas and the brand new state of Jacinto. This went nowhere because, again, no splitting states.
Well, they lose something that was important to understand about American policy at this time was the slavery debate, right? Importation of slavery was ending, but the politics was basically nobody was really trying to decide if all of the United States was going to be, allowing slavery or not allowing slavery. Even on the North, by this time, states were abolishing slavery. In the quarter south, it was rampant there. But the just what usually every government did, every president did there all through the 1800s was simply just try to keep both sides happy by making sure that both sides would be politically equal in a way. So it was like, okay, if you're gonna, and this is era of Western expansion too, right? So new state, we can't just allow one new state. You got to allow 2, because at that point it had been an even amount of slave states versus no slave states, right? And so they would always add 2 at a time. Right, add 2 at a time to keep that balance, and it became harder and harder over time to be able to keep that balance. Of course, this all leads up to the American Civil War in the 1860s.
And if the Texans didn't like those plans, they really weren't going to like that of Senator John Bell. This would see this territory handed to New Mexico and Texas divided into 2 new states. The land east of the Trinity River would be the state of Texas, and the rest of the land would become the Colorado Territory. That was until its population got large enough that it could be split into 2 new states.
Look at this guy. Did you notice where's the person holding the baby
River
there?
Would be the state of Texas, and the rest of the land would become the Colorado Territory. That was.
Look how distressed the person. So they were talking about like population, right? You got the 3 babies. Look how distressed this character is. It's like, oh gosh, I have triplets. I hate this. Why am I having more kids?
Until its population got large enough that it could be split into 2 new states, which Bell wanted to call Colorado and Washington. This proposal wasn't even considered by the Texans. Thus, the US government needed to make sure that Texas kept much more of its territory, and 2 ideas were put forward. The first was by Henry Clay, who just did this, giving this land to New Mexico. This was rejected because it meant that this tiny piece of land here would be ceded from New Mexico to Texas, which meant opening a whole new can of worms. And thus,
it's so tiny.
In the end, it was Senator James Pierce that settled the issue. He put forward this border, which took this from Texas and gave it to the federal government. This was acceptable to Congress because it didn't require splitting the state of Texas. Yay. So long as you considered this to be Texas and this to be extra territory that just happened to belong to Texas.
Americans are like, we don't need Texas rebelling again. We don't need that. They've shown that they will absolutely fight.
So why did the Texans agree to this when initially they just wanted to keep all of their land? Well, the answer was money. Texas has racked up a lot of debt from its independence war, and the federal government promised to take on that debt in return for Texas being carved up. Another reason was that whilst Texas did claim all of this, it never really held on to it. And so what it was given was still seen as extra and still made Texas the largest state in the Union.
Still so weird shaped though. Because it's like some of it is on, those states that like Texas like that, where part of it is natural boundaries like rivers and stuff. And then they'll just like all of a sudden just pick up with a line of latitude or something. It always makes them look weird. I mean, that's a way to do it, and probably a good way to do it, especially if you don't have a lot of fair natural boundaries to negotiate against other potential states.
As such, both sides were mostly happy, and Texas took on the shape that it has to this day. I hope you enjoyed this episode, with a special thanks to my patrons, James Bisonet.
Yo, patrons, by the way, just if you've stuck with me this long, stay tuned pretty soon for me reshaping a whole Patreon program. Keep an eye on that. Okay, final thoughts, though, real quick before you go. Good to splash in back to American history from now and again, and not just because I'm American, but I haven't taught U.S. history in a few years now. I just teach different world history classes, and you dabble in a little bit with, of course, with United States history, but that also comes very late when you're talking about the chronology of teaching world history. And Texas Revolution is not really something. I mean, it was a big part in the Mexican-American War, a big part of U.S. history classes. Get talked about, of course, a little bit in not the Texas part, Mexican-American War, a little bit more for kind of your like 19th century imperialism unit. You'll bring in, instances of the United States expanding into foreign territories and get to bring that up. So it's good to dabble in that a little bit again and bring back my nostalgia for teaching American history. Anyways, so good job there. Of course, with them, it's really is a skill. I feel like that History Matters does, of getting enough information into this video's, they're doing a 30-second outro here with their patrons, but like a 3.5 minute video of putting that in and doing a pretty good job. If you needed to be able to explain something quick, again, that's a skill, and always a lot of fun. All right, with that, let me know if you like this. You want me to keep covering some History Matters stuff. Sometimes it's good to get the short stuff and not just grind out the 30 to 45 minute videos. All right, with that, thanks again for being here. We'll see you next time. Bye.